Welcome to HuntStand Deer Dirt. Today is October 16th and this episode is going to air on the 21st. And it's the perfect time to talk about the transition from, let's say, the more bedding area focused, call it the October lull. Some people say it doesn't exist. I would love to debate that openly, but anyway, we're coming out of that time frame now when the bucks are holed up. They're more reclusive, and then they're going to become more active. And that's a key time for any bow hunter. This is when it starts to get really interesting, because on that date or during that time frame, it starts to make sense to hunt mornings more aggressively because the bucks are on their feet longer. During the middle of October, they tend to get into their bedding areas fairly early. They aren't nearly as active moving between one bedding area and another as they are as they get closer to the rut. So it just makes mornings a little bit more problematic from a hunting standpoint. It's hard to beat the deer in there. It's hard to hunt those areas without making an impact at a time when the bucks aren't moving super well. So when is this time? That transition date for me has always been October 25th. We're close enough now to the rutting activity where the bucks are on their feet for several hours a day that it starts to make sense to hunt mornings. Like I said, you don't want to take a lot of risk without the chance for reward. So you don't want to be going into areas and potentially impacting the movement patterns of the bucks at a time when they aren't moving much in daylight. Well, that's changing now. A few days ahead, that all is going to change into a more and more daylight active widespread movement kind of patterns. And it's an awesome time to hunt a buck that you've got, say, a trail cam pattern on, or maybe a deer that you hunted last season that you didn't get him and you feel like he's still around. He's going to start moving more in daylight now, but he's not going to be traveling over a big area. That's the nice thing about late October, is you can catch these bucks closer to home. They're more active in daylight. They just aren't maybe moving as far away from the areas where you expect them to be. So it's a great opportunity. Again, October 25th really signals that transition for me. And then as we get deeper and deeper into the rut, then things start to break loose. You get more widespread movement. The first does start to come into estrus. Now you get all kinds of buck activity, and they cover a lot more ground. And I'll talk about that real quick too, but first I want to help you to understand this time frame. If you look at the whitetail rut layer on the HuntStand app, you'll see the timing there as well. So you want to know when the highest number of does are in estrus, because that's when a lot of the mature bucks are going to be off the market. They're going to be tied up with the does. They're going to be actively breeding. They're not going to be covering ground. That's what I call the rut's lull. And I say there's an October lull, and I say there's a lull in the middle of the rut. And that middle of the rut lull is when the highest number of does are in estrus. So the best hunting occurs before that, and it sort of continues to gain momentum until you get closer and closer to that time frame. There's a bell-shaped curve. At the top of the curve is when the most does are in estrus, and it ramps up to that, and then it drops back away from that as you go on past that date. And as there are less does in estrus, the bucks have to try harder to find the ones that are, so they're going to cover more ground. So again, all you're doing is just moving forward from that date a specific amount of time. And it really gets going, like I said, around October 25th. One of the very best times of the year for me has been in that November 7th time frame, because now the first few does are coming into estrus. Now we're on the front of that bell curve of estrus does, and you're going to get bucks that are between does or haven't even found their first one yet, that are really moving, really actively seeking a doe. So again, October 25th signals the start for me. November 7th for me is the peak of when the best buck movement takes place. In the last section I talked about timing. So let's talk now about the strategies that go along with those various time frames, and then I'll wrap it up. Late October, I mentioned the fact that now it's time to start becoming a little bit more aggressive, getting out and hunting mornings. The bucks are on their feet longer. I'd still be a little bit reluctant during this time to go deep into the doe bedding areas. You can save those spots for the early part of November. Give that a little bit more time because as soon as you start impacting those does, especially when the bucks aren't there really actively chasing them, they're gonna, through their body language, they're gonna transmit to the rest of the deer that there's potential danger in the area, and also they may even stop using some of those areas. And you want them to be the bait that brings the bucks in as you get into the early part of November. So I'd stay focused on more fringe type areas in the mornings now, maybe funnels between two doe bedding areas, spots that you can get in and out of without really impacting the does themselves. But in the afternoons, it's going to make sense to stick with the food sources. The bucks are just traveling a little bit earlier in the day. They're getting to those places sooner. They haven't changed their patterns very much. Maybe they're visiting a few more of these in an afternoon in daylight that they might have reserved for, after dark, in the prior weeks. So there's no big change of hunting strategy here. Just hunt the food sources. That usually plays itself out, in my experience, sometime around the 7th to 8th, 9th of November. The does stop coming to these spots. So the bucks stop going there. The does don't want to be harassed by every buck that, walks past. So they stop coming out into the open quite as much. So the feeding areas have, limited attraction once you get into the real intense rutting phase. But now, in late October, they can be really, really good. So now let's jump into the November timeframe. And like I said, the mornings now should be really focused around the doe bedding areas. These are awesome spots to hunt. In fact, you can pull all-day hunts in these locations. I would not be hesitant at all to stay in a doe bedding area for the entire day from, say, November 4th, 5th, right on through the 12th. These are, in fact, that's the strategy that I've used quite a bit in the past few years, and it works really well. The trick, of course, is getting in and out, and that's always the trick, but you can't beat those spots. Stay on the downwind fringe. That's where the bucks travel when they go through these areas anyway, and you should have a really, really enjoyable early to mid-November. And if you want to break out from that, any kind of travel funnel is good. The bucks that are on the move are gonna, cover ground. They're gonna use funnels. Those are natural spots for a bow hunter. Like I said earlier, the feeding areas are fine until about, the 7th, 8th of November. Then they become less and less attractive because the does aren't there. Other morning options, gosh, I don't think I would. I think I would stick with the doe bedding areas as much as you can. Get back into the cover. The bucks are looking for the does. They know where the does are going to be, and that's where they're going. So hopefully this has all been helpful to you. It's getting to be prime time. I'm excited about it. You can see behind me, the sun is starting to light up one of those ridges, and that's where the does bed. So maybe in a couple of days, I'll be sitting up on that ridge behind me. Well, I appreciate you joining me. We'll see you right back here in 2 weeks for the next episode of HuntStand's Deer Dirt.